When I left my ranch for a few weeks to care for my sick mother, the last thing I expected was to come back and find everything turned upside down. My barn gone, my land violated, and sitting right where my barn used to be. A massive warehouse, slapped together by none other than our neighborhood's very own HOA. But this wasn't just any HOA. This was the same group that's given me a CD since the day I moved in. I've heard the comments, seen the stares, and felt the tension. But I never thought they'd go this far. I've owned this land for years. It's not just property to Mitt's home, okay? My animals were raised here. My kids learned how to ride. Horses here. Every inch of this place holds memories. So imagine my shock pulling up the driveway and seeing bulldozer tracks, scattered debris, and my barn flattened like it never existed. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then I saw the signs. The warehouse wasn't just sitting on my land, it had HOA property markers on it. I tried calling them, thinking maybe it was a mistake. But the silence I got in return told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. And worse, I had no clue what else they did while I was gone. Were they watching my house? Did they go through my stuff? I had cameras, but even they were mysteriously offline. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind was racing, heart pounding. How could they do this legally? Or was it even legal at all? Had no choice but to dig deeper. And what I uncovered next left me absolutely speechless. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office, hoping to get some answers. I brought photos, my property deed, everything. The clerk was polite at first, till I mentioned the HOA. Her tone shifted. She glanced around, lowered her voice, and said, "You're not the first one they've done this to." That hit me hard. What do you mean I'm not the first? She didn't say much more. Just that things in our area had been getting complicated ever since the HOA board got new leadership last year. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my barn. This was bigger. I started digging. I talked to my neighbors, and one by one, stories came out. One man told me they tried to fine him thousands of dollars for building a chicken coop on land he's owned for 20 years. Another family quietly moved away after their well was mysteriously shut off following a dispute. Everyone was scared to speak out, but the pattern was clear. The HOA was expanding its control, and anyone who didn't fall in line got targeted. But why me? My place was outside their usual jurisdiction. Then it hit me the property line. A few months ago, the HOA had tried to redraw some boundaries, claiming they were streamlining the community. I refused to sign their documents. That must have made me a problem, a target. The warehouse they built wasn't even up to code. I could tell just by looking. No permits posted, rushed construction, and materials just dumped on my land like trash. Yet nobody from the county seemed willing to act. It felt like every door I knocked on led to a dead end or someone suddenly too afraid to talk. But I wasn't going to let this slide. Not without a fight. I started taking photos, videos, everything I could to document the damage. The warehouse looked like it had been thrown up overnight. No inspections, no markings, just metal siding and rusting bolts. My barn, which had stood strong through storms and time, was now a pile of splinters and cracked beams. What really stung was that there wasn't a single warning. No letter, no notice. Just destruction. I contacted a local land attorney, and even he was stunned. If they did this without a permit or legal claim, that's trespassing, he told me. But getting the law to move on a private HOA wasn't so easy. Meanwhile, neighbors started backing off. People who used to wave or stop by suddenly avoided eye contact. I found out the HOA president had started spreading rumors that I was being difficult, that I had agreed verbally to the warehouse project. Total lies. But that was their game. Twist the story, make you look unstable, isolate you. I wasn't just fighting for my land anymore, I was fighting for my name. Then came the strange stuff. My mailbox was ripped open one morning. A motion light I installed kept shutting off at random. I checked my security system and found parts of the footage missing, as if someone had tampered with it. I couldn't prove it was the HOA, but everything started after I pushed back. One night, I heard footsteps outside. When I went to check, there was no one but tire tracks led right up to the side of my house and disappeared back into the road. It felt like they wanted to wear me down, scare me into walking away. But they didn't realize I wasn't built like that. I wasn't giving up. The more I uncovered, the deeper this mess got. And I hadn't even found the worst of it yet. I knew something wasn't right when I got a letter taped to my front door. It wasn't from the county or the court, it was handwritten. No return address, just a warning. It said, "Drop it before things get worse." That was the moment I realized I might be dealing with more than just a pushy HOA. This was intimidation. My hands were shaking as I held the note. I called the sheriff, but they brushed it off like it was a prank. I could tell they didn't want to get involved. And maybe that's because someone higher up was already involved. The HOA president, a man named Carl, had been unusually quiet during all this. But I started doing my own research. Turns out he used to be in real estate development and had connections with some shady contractors. I found permits for nearby properties signed off by names that didn't even match up with official records. It was starting to look like the warehouse on my land wasn't just about control, it was about money. And I was standing in the way of a bigger plan. That same week, I caught two strangers on my land, claiming they were inspecting the structure. But they had no IDs, no badges, just reflective vests and clipboards. When I asked who sent them, they gave me a name I didn't recognize, then quickly left. I wrote down their license plate, but it came back unregistered. That night, my fence was cut, everything was closing in. I started feeling like a prisoner on my own ranch. Cameras didn't stop them. Authorities wouldn't listen. And the warehouse. They were still adding to it, like they knew no one would stop them. The final straw came when I noticed fresh markings spray painted along the edge of my property. That's when I realized they weren't finished yet. And what they were planning next would change everything. The spray-painted markings weren't random. They were numbers and symbols, spaced out in a pattern that stretched across my entire southern fence line. At first, I thought it might be a surveyor's code, but when I cross-checked it with my land deed, I realized those marks didn't match the legal boundaries of my ranch. They were pushing the line even farther, claiming more of my land piece by piece. I took pictures, measured everything. And that's when I noticed something else. Those symbols led directly to a section of the woods I rarely used. A quiet patch of trees where I kept old tools and fencing supplies. But when I walked back there, I froze. Half the trees were gone, cleared out without a trace. And in their place, fresh tire tracks, cement bags, and rebar. They weren't just building one illegal warehouse, they were preparing to build a second one. On my land, in secret, while I was still living there. That wasn't just trespassing anymore. That felt like a takeover. I rushed back to confront the HOA in person, but their office was closed. The front door had a notice posted, closed for renovation. Renovation. It didn't make sense. And that's when I noticed something in the window, a stack of files left carelessly on a desk. My name was on one of the folders, along with maps, hand-drawn sketches, and what looked like financial records. I couldn't make out the details, but it was enough to send chills down my spine. Why was my property being documented like some kind of project? I went home that night trying to make sense of it all, but the answers didn't come. Instead, just after midnight, my dogs went wild. Barking, growling, circling the back gate. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. And what I saw standing at the edge of my yard made my stomach drop. Standing at the edge of my yard, just beyond the broken fence, was Carl, the HOA president. He wasn't alone. 2 other men stood beside him, wearing the same reflective vests as the so-called inspectors from earlier. They didn't move, just stared. I called out, demanding to know what they were doing on my property in the middle of the night. Carl finally stepped forward and said something that stopped me cold. "You can either sell quietly or we'll finish what we started." That was it. No more games. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I told them I had footage of the construction, the destruction of my barn, the trespassing, everything. Carl didn't flinch. "Do what you want," he said, "but we already filed for annexation. That land won't be yours much longer." That was the moment it all clicked. They weren't just bullying me, they were trying to change the zoning, flip the land for profit, and use my ranch as leverage in a much larger land deal. And they thought I'd be too afraid or too quiet to stop it. The next morning, I drove straight to the local news station with my footage and documents. Within hours, the story spread. Reporters showed up. Officials suddenly returned my calls. And under pressure, the county halted all HOA development until a full investigation could be done. It felt like I had finally turned the tide. They couldn't build, they couldn't bully. Not anymore. But just when I thought it was over, I received one last letter, this time from a private development company I'd never heard of. It claimed they had contractual rights to sections of my land dating back years. That was impossible, or at least I thought it was. Until I looked closer at the documents and saw a signature that looked strangely familiar. It was my late uncle's, and I had no idea he'd ever sold anything. The letter from the development company nearly broke me. Spent days digging through old records, family documents, anything I could find. Eventually, I found the truth. Years ago, my uncle had signed a temporary access agreement, never a sale. But somehow, that paperwork had been twisted and passed around, eventually landing in the hands of this company. With a lawyer's help, we proved the signature had been misused and the deal had no legal standing. That final blow unraveled the entire scheme. The HOA's planned zoning expansion was blocked. The illegal warehouse was ordered to be dismantled, and Carl quietly resigned from the board. No press release, no apology. Just disappeared. Neighbors who had once stayed silent began reaching out, sharing their own stories, and finally speaking up. The county launched a broader review of HOA activities across the area. Turns out, mine wasn't the only case where power had been abused and property lines pushed. What started as one person defending their ranch sparked a bigger change than I ever expected. I rebuilt my barn, but this time with stronger walls and better security. Not just for the animals, but for peace of mind. I installed better cameras, made sure every document related to my land was backed up, and started helping others in the area who were dealing with similar issues. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for what's right when no one else will. This fight taught me that not all threats come loudly. Some sneak in through paperwork, quiet meetings, and late-night visits. But no matter how powerful someone seems, truth has a way of surfacing. And in the end, protecting your home means knowing your rights, trusting your gut, and refusing to back down when it matters most.